Hello, welcome to the YouTube channel of Christ United Methodist Church, located in the Owen Brown Interfaith Center here in Columbia, Maryland. My name is Reverend Angela Wells. My pronouns are she and her, and it's my absolute joy to serve as the pastor here at Christ UMC. Whoever you are and whatever your story, we are so grateful that you have found your way here to our YouTube channel today, and we look forward to connecting with you further. Christ UMC is a reconciling congregation, which means that we as a church have committed to the full inclusion of LGBTQ+ persons in the life and ministry of the church. We have also pledged to become an anti-racist church. Both of these commitments are a part of our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, striving to love God and neighbor in all we do. At CUMC, we celebrate Christian love that encompasses absolutely all people.
Verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is shepherd my people Israel. Who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
We three kings, the wise men, the Magi. We know them by many names, sure, and we think we know them, right? While the story of the Magi's arrival is often blended with Luke's story of the Nativity, we still know how the story goes. The Magi come from the east looking for the King of the Jews. The star leads them to the Christ child. They offer their gifts, thus completing our nativity scene, the end, right? We know this story, but do we? As a preacher, the hardest part of preaching these familiar texts is that the first step is often unlearning what we think we know so that we can listen again with new ears, read again with new eyes, experience again with a new and open heart. Because as the United Church of Christ's tagline states, "Never place a period where God has placed a comma. God is still speaking." So I invite us to mentally unpack all that we associate with the Magi and listen for what God might be saying to us here in this time and place through this ancient story. Now, the actual biblical text does not call them kings nor wise men. The text calls them Magi. The word Magi has a Persian background, and it's the same root word that gives us the English word magic. Now, perhaps because of the linguistic tie to Persia and the detail that they come from the east, many scholars have interpreted the Magi to be Persian astrologers or Zoroastrian priests. The word appears in other places in Scripture. It's translated as astrologers in the book of Daniel, but in the book of Acts, it is translated as sorcerer. That's not exactly a positive connotation. In the book of Numbers, there's also a magus, a singular of Magi. That's your Jeopardy clue for the week. And this Magus has a donkey who's more clued in than he is. Again, it's not a great connotation. And in Exodus, during the back and forth between Moses and Pharaoh, there are magi, court magicians, that exacerbate already dangerous situations. Magi do not have a great reputation. They aren't really to be trusted, not so wise after all. The first reference to the Magi as wise men came from Constantine, Roman emperor who upgraded Christianity from a persecuted sect to the religion of the empire. Now, a lot of harm came from marrying Christianity with the power of empire. A lot of harm still comes from marrying Christianity with the power of modern day empires. So suffice it to say, Constantine has his own agenda for lauding the Magi as wise. My New Testament professor in seminary, who happens to be a world-renowned New Testament scholar, Amy Jill Levine, she argues that early Jewish readers would have understood the Magi not as wise, but as fools. Bear with me. It kind of makes sense. So here come these relatively privileged foreigners, astrologers, priests, sorcerers, whoever they are. They have enough means to travel a long distance and offer extravagant gifts. So they aren't poor. Here come these privileged foreigners, and they trip into a very politically fraught situation. They journey from the east and go straight to King Herod, the imperial puppet king who is well known for being volatile, murderous, and quite attached to his own power. And they ask, where is the child who has been born king of the Jews? What did they think would happen? This is an extraordinarily dangerous question to ask. Anyone with any common sense at all should know that this question would anger King Herod. Have you heard that phrase, don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good? Anybody? This fits the Magi to a T. They are so wrapped up in their own journey, gazing heavenward at the stars, that they have zero awareness, it seems, of the very real and very dangerous sociopolitical context in which they are now located. And there are real consequences to their obliviousness. The Magi set a chain of events into motion that leads to the slaughter of the innocents. Herod's attempt to kill Jesus by killing all of the infants under 2 years old. The Magi had no intentional malice, it seems, and yet they are complicit in great harm. Here we see that lesson again, impact over intent. No matter how pure their intentions, those intentions do not change the harm, the impact that resulted from their actions. This is a really hard lesson. It's hard precisely because this ancient story isn't so ancient. Like the Magi, we too often find ourselves having to learn that no matter how pure our intentions, sometimes we cause harm anyway. Like the Magi, we too find ourselves unintentionally complicit in systems of great harm. White supremacy and racism, genocide in Palestine funded in part by our tax dollars, anti-Semitism, neocolonialism, unrestrained capitalism. We did not create these systems. We do not pull the trigger, literally or metaphorically. And yet, we are part of and benefit from the very systems that create these great injustices. We too are complicit. And the story doesn't end there. Yes, the Magi tip off Herod, but something happens that changes the trajectory of the story. Something happens that literally saves Jesus's life, that gives Joseph and Mary enough time to flee as refugees to Egypt. Someone intervenes just in time too, before the Magi have a chance to return to Herod to give the exact GPS location of the Christ child to this maniacal leader, as they have been instructed to do, and as it seems they in their blissful ignorance had every intention to do. Verse 12 is short, a seeming afterthought to the story, but it may be the most important verse of all. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Ironically, it took a dream to wake up the Magi. As it turns out, the Magi have their own epiphany, pun intended. And they have a choice what to do with this newfound information. Will they continue on their previously scheduled trajectory, or will they chart a new course? I mean, their route was already planned, and they had traveled a long way. Surely they were ready to get on with it and get home. It would be easier to retrace their steps. It takes effort and intentionality to chart a new course. But thankfully, the Magi choose what is right and not what is easy. They decide that now that they know better, they will do better. They cannot change their past actions and the consequences of those actions, but they can choose a new way home. They refuse to cooperate any further with the state-sanctioned genocide that Herod had in mind. It wasn't too late to chart a new path. It wasn't too late to say no more, to refuse to cooperate any further with the powers that sought to harm. No matter what has been, saying no more is always an option. Now, this is good news for us as 21st century Magi of sorts, relatively privileged folks, a little foolish at times, operating in complex sociopolitical realities where far too often we have unknowingly been complicit in the oppression of our neighbors. This story reminds us that it's never too late to wake up, to have an epiphany, to make a choice to refuse to cooperate any longer with the systems and powers that seek to harm. It's not too late to return home by another road. My Episcopal colleague, Reverend Lauren Grubal Thomas, published a powerful reflection on this passage for our current national and international context. This is a story of a ruler who, in an attempt to neutralize a threat to his power, wages genocide, no matter the number of children who become civilian casualties. We cannot read this story in a vacuum, as if the story were long ago and far away. Since the war between Israel and Hamas started on October 8th, a child has been killed in Gaza approximately every 10 minutes. UNICEF recently named Gaza as the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. And whatever our individual politics or opinions are, the reality is that our tax dollars are funding this violence. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that to be an extraordinarily painful truth that I'd rather pretend wasn't so, but can't quite pretend. Reverend Thomas points to the decision of the Magi to return home by another road, reminding us that refusing to cooperate with oppression is always an option. She continues, writing, "We all have a collective responsibility to stay sensitive to the Spirit and go home by another way, to refuse to cooperate with this genocide by every means available to us." But how? It's a valid question. It's really easy to name the problem, but it's really hard to figure out how to be a part of the solution. It's easy to feel so overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude and complexity of the situation that we end up frozen like deer in headlights. At the Justice for All meeting this past Thursday, we talked about this struggle, this idea that there's so much wrong with the world right now and we want to help, but it's really hard to know where to start. Someone mentioned that what we need right now is just a few things, just like 2 things that we can do. A few tangible ways that we can focus our energy. That idea seemed to resonate with many of us in the group. So today I want to offer just two invitations. Two tangible ways that we can choose to go home by another road. Two tangible ways that we can choose to refuse to be complicit in oppression. One global and one local. First, the global. Will you consider writing to at least one of your elected officials this week to ask for our government to call for a ceasefire and to block additional funding for weapons that are being used to kill children? It's not about supporting Palestine or Israel. Many will try to convince you that you have to pick sides. The goal here is not political, it's humanitarian. Think what you think about the politics of the situation and what the long-term path to peace might look like. But there's no path to peace until there is a ceasefire. That's the bare minimum of solidarity with our Gazan siblings who are suffering. Now, I'm going to admit that while I know that writing to our elected officials is a good and important thing on this and many, many other matters, it's something that I haven't done very often. I'm not exactly sure why. It's not hard, but I guess I wonder if it makes any difference. It feels like such a small thing to do in the face of something so large. But then I think that's kind of silly of me. It seems like it's not enough, so I decide to do nothing at all. It's not my most logical moment. So my invitation is for all of us, myself included. I am committing to write this week. Will you join me? And will you ask me next week if I did? Our senators here in Maryland are Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen. And I looked it up for y'all for this U.S. House of Representatives because I live in a different place. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, most of you have Representative John Sarbanes as your representative in the House. Is that correct? Excellent. He responds, even better. And good, I can read a map, so. It does. And if you're not sure, if you, like me, live farther away and you're not sure who your representative is, house.gov, there's like a find your representative button. It's real easy. Each official's website has an easy to find contact me button. But if you prefer stale mail, I printed cards with addresses that I'll have after the service. And I also have copies from the Action Network that has pointers of things to say. And actually, if you go to their website, they have an easy way that you write it once and it sends it to all three of your two senators and your rep. So I'll have those on the side counter after the service. So that's the first action, a 10-minute, if that, commitment this week to write to an elected official. And the second invitation you already heard a little bit about. Hint from Kevin. Register for the bystander training that we are hosting with the Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity on January 28th. I have participated in a bystander training before and can tell you firsthand that it's an extraordinarily helpful training. It gives you the tools that you need to be able to interrupt harm in our local community in your day-to-day life. You never know what situation of harassment or bullying or harm you may happen upon. Yes, even in Howard County. Hate crimes are on the rise across the country, even here. In Maryland, based on data from 2022, 59.1% of hate crimes are based on race or ethnicity, 17.3% based on religion, and 17.2% based on sexual orientation. If you come across a situation of someone being harassed, do you know what to do to help the person being targeted without making matters worse? Do you know how to de-escalate the situation? Unless you've had some particular training, your answer is probably no. That's okay. You have no reason to know how to do those things. And now we have an opportunity to learn. And once we know better, we can do better. As Reverend Thomas said, we have a collective responsibility to refuse to cooperate with oppression by every means available to us. Here's a means. Let's take it. Together we can multiply the impact. Together we can faithfully live into our baptismal vow to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. Together we can interrupt harm. Together, like the Magi, we can find another road home. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new to CUMC, whether you are local or tuning in from far away, we would love to connect with you. Please feel free to visit our website at www.cumcobic.org. Visit us on Facebook or connect with me, Reverend Angela, directly at angelawells153@gmail.com. As you move into whatever is next in your day, I invite you to receive this blessing. Beloved, you are made in God's own image. You are enough. You are not alone. Go forth with the blessing of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, to share the light and love of Christ in your community and far beyond.